I believe providing some context would be helpful. So here's a brief overview of my family background. My parents divorced when my brother 36 and I 34 were very young, 5 and 3 years old, respectively. Initially, we lived with our mother, as my dad believed it was the right decision. However, it turned into a nightmare. Our mother was often absent, leaving us alone and locking us up. She would frequently scream at us, blaming us for the demise of her marriage, with a particular emphasis on me, claiming I took my dad away because I was a girl. She exhibited narcissistic traits, and we despised living with her. Despite receiving alimony and child support, she spent it on her charities, family, and friends, leaving us in near poverty conditions. The only time she presented us well was when we went to church to maintain appearances. Eventually, we moved in with our dad after he remarried. I vividly remember his shock at our appearance when we arrived, prompting him to decide never to send us back to our mother. Although we had visited him before, our mother's reaction to his remarriage pushed him to keep us permanently. Despite our mother's objections and her family's disapproval, we settled into our new family, receiving therapy and support. Our stepmother embraced the challenge of nurturing two scared children, providing us with excellent education and living conditions. Throughout this ordeal, my brother and I grew even closer. When I was 10, my mother had another daughter with an unknown man who wanted nothing to do with them. She pleaded with my dad to help her financially, citing her past sacrifices for him. Soft-hearted as he is, my dad agreed to provide support under the condition that she find employment before the alimony ended. Our stepmother empathized with her situation and supported this decision. While we maintained occasional contact with our mother over the years, it was never frequent. Our dad encouraged some level of interaction, but he never pressured us. My brother visited more often, although he never truly connected with anyone there. Personally, I visited only 3 times between the ages of 10 and 18. I am now married and living far away from home. It's been about 10 years since I last spoke to my mother, and she hasn't been invited to any significant events in my life. However, I've heard through my brother that she's attempted various schemes to get money from him, including faking cancer and other lies. I've always believed that cutting off contact entirely would be the best approach, but my brother chooses to maintain minimal contact. About a month ago, my dad had a health scare, so we went to check on him at the hospital. While we were waiting, my mother suddenly appeared with our half-sister, demanding to see my dad and asking if he would make it. I ignored her, but she persisted, discussing how we would divide my dad's assets if he didn't make it. She claimed that my half-sister was entitled to a share, despite my brother explaining that there was a will in place. She even went as far as presenting a birth certificate as proof of her claim. However, the truth is that my dad had a vasectomy immediately after divorcing her, and we weren't even in the country when she could have gotten pregnant. I warned her to leave, but she persisted. In the end, I took legal action. I hired a lawyer and a researcher to investigate the situation. It turned out that she had committed fraud by falsely listing my dad's name on the birth certificate. I pressed charges against her for harassment and filed a complaint for fraud using my dad's name. I also requested a no-contact order. While my brother believes I overreacted and let my anger control me, my dad, stepmother, and other relatives supported my decision, seeing it as necessary to protect the family. On the other hand, my mother's family has been harassing me, accusing me of trying to harm my own mother. They demand that I cover her expenses since she lost her job due to the situation. My brother, though distant, also refuses to assist her financially. I find myself questioning whether I went too far, as my brother suggested. More than anything, I contemplate whether my actions have strained my relationship with him. It's preferable to address this now while our father is still with us and capable of speaking for himself, rather than waiting until he's gone and having to engage in a battle with our mother over mere hearsay. Her true intentions were laid bare when she showed up demanding answers about our father's health scare. Consider the chaos she could wreak later if left unchecked. If my brother fails to grasp the significance of my efforts to safeguard our father, akin to how he shielded us when we were unable to fend for ourselves, then I'll have to await his change of heart. I refused to expend a single penny to appease my mother's greed. And where was her family's sense of righteousness when she was subjecting us to abuse and neglect? When my brother becomes a father, He'll comprehend the lengths a parent will go to protect their offspring. And if he's a good father, he'll live long enough to witness the profound depths of his children's love. What I did was not only right but necessary. My husband and I, both in our 30s, have shared a decade of marriage and are blessed with twin sons. Additionally, my husband has a daughter who recently turned 20. He no longer communicates with her mother, who's been absent from our lives for an extended period. I played a significant role in raising my stepdaughter, despite her once exhibiting signs of entitlement due to being an only child for a considerable time. Fortunately, she largely outgrew this behavior after leaving home at 18. While my husband and I hold well-paying full-time positions, I've primarily been the breadwinner throughout our relationship. Moreover, I've inherited a substantial sum from my grandfather, which we've utilized to secure our home and cover expenses like our son's daycare. Last April, my stepdaughter's boyfriend proposed, and both my husband and I were thrilled for them. As a wedding gift, we offered financial assistance with their wedding plans. Originally scheduled for August, their wedding plans were thwarted by the venue's restrictions, requiring a reschedule to next year or a drastic reduction in guest count to below 50, with mandatory mask wearing. Faced with this dilemma, my stepdaughter implored us to finance an alternative venue she'd found available in October. However, we declined, citing our prior substantial non-refundable deposit at the initial venue, inclusive of additional expenses for open bar services. We advised her to follow suit with other brides affected by the pandemic, assuring her that waiting another year wouldn't be overly burdensome. Despite our rationale, my stepdaughter reacted with indignation, displaying impatience to proceed with her wedding plans without consulting us. She canceled all the booked vendors, for which my husband and I had paid the deposits. I grew weary of her tantrums and informed her that she'd have to seek financial assistance elsewhere, as she wouldn't receive a penny from me unless it was for a cab ride to the courthouse for an elopement. That's the wedding she deserved for her ingratitude. Since then, she's phoned her dad multiple times in tears, apologizing and pleading for another chance. I contacted the vendors she canceled, and while most were understanding, a few offered to reinstate the contracts she terminated. I declined and decided to cut my losses, a decision my husband disagrees with, accusing me of being too harsh. I explained that I refuse to enable our daughter's spoiled behavior any longer, and if he wants to foot the bill, he can do so using his own income, as mine covered over 60% of the wedding costs. My husband believes I'm being just as stubborn and unreasonable as our daughter. Am I the one at fault here? Not at all. She took it upon herself to cancel everything I had paid deposits on due to impatience, so she can deal with the consequences herself. I was more than generous, and it's time for her to learn that actions have repercussions. I have 3 children, with the eldest born when I was 16, the second at 20, and I'm currently 6 months pregnant. When I started university at 18, my oldest stayed with my ex-stepmother because I couldn't afford to bring her with me. During university, I found myself in a relationship that quickly turned abusive physically, emotionally, and financially. Upon becoming pregnant, I sought refuge at my ex-stepmother's house, gave birth, and applied to a new university in a town 3 hours away, where I relocated with both my children, ex-stepmother, and brothers. My ex never knew about my pregnancy when I left him, and I confided in my family about the father's identity, fearing they might inform him. I've been extremely cautious about my online presence and connections ever since. I went to extraordinary lengths to ensure my ex couldn't track me down, meticulously removing any potential links between us. Then, just over 3 years ago, an official contacted me, requesting a DNA test for my son in relation to my ex. Upon reaching out to him, he shockingly revealed that he was aware of our son's existence and expressed his intention to pursue custody. This revelation was my worst nightmare, given that custody in my country is automatically divided 50-50 unless I could prove him unfit. Unfortunately, without concrete evidence of the abuse I suffered, he painted me as unstable, leveraging information he shouldn't have had access to. It wasn't until he erupted in a threatening outburst in front of legal authorities that I managed to secure a favorable outcome. Otherwise, he could have easily gained equal or even majority custody. Several weeks later, I pieced together that my sister had been the source of his knowledge, believing in the importance of our son knowing his father and presuming his innocence until proven guilty. Despite her subsequent apologies, I chose to sever ties with her, a decision that has endured for 2 years. In the interim, I've embarked on a new chapter, becoming engaged and now expecting another child. However, my sister's exclusion from these significant life events has left her deeply distressed. Meanwhile, other members of my family, including aunts, uncles, cousins, my ex-stepmother, and siblings, have adopted differing stances on the matter. While some respect my autonomy and decision to maintain distance from my sister, others insist that I should reconcile with her, citing the passage of time as grounds for forgiveness. Despite their claims, I remain steadfast in my resolve, acutely aware that no amount of temporal distance can erase the trauma I endured or the role my sister played in enabling my abuser. Nevertheless, navigating these familial dynamics has proven challenging, with some relatives threatening to sever ties if I don't acquiesce to their demands. In light of this, I grapple with how best to assert and uphold my boundaries with my sister while safeguarding the relationships I hold dear. For me, the decision to maintain distance from her remains non-negotiable. The safety and well-being of my family depend on it. You've taken a firm stance on who you want in your life, signaling that anyone who supports her is no better. It's a time for renewal, leaving behind the baggage of the past to prioritize your new family. The question arises, is it worth holding onto bitterness and distrust with your biological family, or is it wiser to nurture a bond of trust, love, and understanding within the family you create? Around 2 years ago, my granny and I engaged in a heartfelt conversation about her posthumous wishes, delving into funeral arrangements and her last will and testament. She expressed a desire to bequeath most of her belongings to me, with any liquid assets to be divided evenly between my brother and me. Though the sum wasn't substantial, it held significance. Sensing an opportunity to alleviate a dire situation, I proposed redirecting the funds to my brother's former partner, Daisy. Daisy had been grappling with challenges since my brother abandoned her, leaving her to shoulder childcare responsibilities and other burdens alone. Prior to our intervention, Daisy was barely scraping by, residing in a distant locale without access to reliable transportation, hindering my ability to provide meaningful assistance. Granny embraced the idea, acknowledging its merit, prompting us to approach Daisy with our proposal. Grateful for the lifeline, Daisy accepted our offer, and we proceeded to facilitate her relocation to a more accessible area, equipping her with a means of transportation. Witnessing the positive ripple effects, Granny reveled in the joy of having her great-grandchildren in close proximity, while I relished the opportunity to extend a helping hand more frequently. Moreover, this newfound stability empowered Daisy to pursue her nursing degree without the encumbrance of financial strain. However, a few nights ago, amidst the cloak of darkness, my brother resurfaced after a prolonged absence, seething with anger and hurling baseless accusations my way. He vehemently accused me of pilfering his inheritance and manipulating Granny into diverting funds to Daisy. His tirade escalated to the point where he barged into Granny's quarters, rousing her from slumber, and cast aspersions on my integrity, alleging that I was exploiting her vulnerability for personal gain. The confrontation reached a fever pitch, prompting concerned neighbors to summon law enforcement, though my brother absconded before their arrival. Upon his subsequent return, he brazenly asserted that I had overstepped my bounds by intervening in Daisy's affairs or concerning myself with the welfare of his offspring. Since then, I've grappled with feelings of guilt and uncertainty, questioning the righteousness of my actions. Yet, Granny remains steadfast in her reassurance, affirming that my intentions were pure and that I acted within the bounds of morality and integrity. Despite her unwavering support, my brother remains entrenched in his accusatory stance, refusing to entertain reason or reconciliation. As I sifted through some winter items, I stumbled upon my engagement ring tucked away in the midst of them. Its discovery was accompanied by the revelation of its price tag, a substantial $8,000. This sum, a significant amount for us, underscored the effort my partner had put into saving for it. The timing of this find, however, struck a dissonant chord within me. It dredged up memories of recent hardship and loss. Just months prior, my world had been shaken by the passing of my beloved grandmother. Her sudden decline in health had left me reeling, unable to afford the expense of visiting her one last time or attending her funeral. Despite my desperate attempts to secure extra shifts and even consider taking on a second job, financial constraints had held me back. It was a time of profound grief and longing, compounded by the inability to bid farewell to someone who had played such a pivotal role in my life. My grandmother and I shared a bond that transcended distance, a daily ritual of exchanging words of love and affection. Her absence left a void that seemed impossible to fill. Against this backdrop, the sight of the engagement ring's receipt, dated a mere 2 weeks after my grandmother's passing, stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. While I fully acknowledge that it is my partner's prerogative to spend his money as he sees fit, I couldn't shake the sense of hurt and disappointment. It felt as though he had chosen to prioritize a symbol of our future over granting me the opportunity to bid a proper farewell to a cherished member of my past. In the midst of this internal struggle, I find myself torn. On one hand, I grapple with feelings of guilt and unworthiness, questioning whether I have any right to feel hurt or aggrieved. On the other hand, I can't help but wonder if there was a missed opportunity for communication and understanding between us. Should I have mustered the courage to ask for financial assistance during my time of need, or is it reasonable to expect that those closest to us would anticipate and empathize with our unspoken needs? As I navigate through this emotional labyrinth, I am left grappling with questions that have no easy answers. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, one thing remains clear: the need for open, honest communication and a willingness to acknowledge and address each other's vulnerabilities and needs. Only then can we hope to bridge the gap between expectation and reality, forging a path forward that is grounded in mutual understanding and respect.